In this video I'll show you how to make these nice little 30-inch cargo parachutes that I like to use to drop cargo with. Out of 2 yards of typical material you can make 4 of these parachutes. It takes about an hour to make 4 at a cost of about $3 to $5 each. Now there are 2 typical sizes I would recommend making these parachutes in. The main one you see here is a 30-inch diameter. You start with a 30-inch piece of fabric. It ends up being about 29 inches or so in diameter, made of nylon. This fabric comes in 60-inch widths usually, and 2 yards, that's 72 inches, will give you the ability to make 4 parachutes of this size. The fabric I'm speaking of is called jacket liner or garment liner, and it's a thin nylon. It's very supple and slippery, and it's like ripstop nylon, but it's cheaper and it's lighter and it's slicker, and so it seems to be better for making these parachutes. So look for garment liner or jacket liner, and it comes in at least 10 colors. Pick one that you like. The suspension component of the parachute is made of this stuff called TULLE, T-U-L-L-E, and it also comes in many colors. And this stuff is super cheap. It's $1, maybe $2 per yard. This perimeter is just joined with a very thin stripe of hot glue that's applied all the way around the perimeter, and then the parachute is inverted so that that seam is actually up inside the parachute itself, so it's nice and smooth and tends not to catch on itself as it deploys like this. And finally, for suspension line, I like to use actually parachute cord. Fittingly, it's nice and thick and supple, it's strong and relatively light, and it's very cheap. You can get 50 yards of this stuff for well under 10 bucks, and it's good use for other stuff too. You'll need zip ties, 1 per parachute. Small to medium size is fine. Any kind is fine, preferably not too large. And then you'll need either some electrical tape or some shrink tubing just to cover up the zip tie. So I've got my piece of garment liner here. It's 60 inches wide by 2 yards or 72 inches long. And since it won't fit on screen, I'm going to show you on this piece of paper. And so imagine that this is the 60 inches width, and this is the 2 yards or 72 inches long here. You're going to want to divide this into 30-inch wide strips, like 30-inch long pieces, like this. So this will be 30, 30, square, 30, 30, and so forth. You know, have a little spare down here. Alternatively, the quick and dirty way would just be to take your entire piece of fabric and quarter it over like that, and quarter it over like that, and then just cut it into rectangles like that. Now the next step will be to turn this square piece of fabric, you should have 4 if you've used the 30-inch diameter parachute, into a circle. And the easiest way I found is just to simply fold it in half, and then fold that in half, and then fold that in along the margins, keeping the apex, the eventual apex here. Fold that back and forth until it gets pretty thin, like that, and then cut that with some scissors or a razor blade. And so when you've got your jacket liner here folded up like that and cut it, you can just make a straight cut like that, and when it unfolded, you'll have an approximate circle. It's actually a polygon of some name, however many sides it's got, but it's close enough to a circle. And so here's my garment liner. Here's the apex. I've folded and folded and folded it, always keeping in mind to keep the short distance here always visible so you can see where to cut it. So when you're done, you'll be cutting right across here, and it should be 15 inches or half the diameter of your chute from that cut point to the center of the parachute, or the apex right there. And I like to cut mine off with a straight edge and just razor knife. Now you'll be left with a nearly circular, roughly 30-inch diameter piece of garment liner ready to finish the parachute. Now once you've got your 30-inch piece of garment liner nylon cut out into a rough circle, you can take the tulle, that's the fine netting, and cover it all up. And make sure that before you start to glue anything that this piece does in fact cover the entire circle all the way around, because you can't really rescue it later. So hold the tulle down nice and flat on the nylon, and just put a very thin stripe of glue right through the tool onto the nylon, and just keep going. And if you have any irregularities in the circle in the nylon that you want to smooth out, you can just cut the corners off with a nice rounded arc of the glue. So now it looks like this, with the hot glue applied right through the tool, right up to the edge of the nylon, and the tool is securely adhered to the nylon. And you just take some scissors and cut around, all the way around, right up to the edge of the glue. Okay, so now I've got that all nicely trimmed off all the way around, and you can inspect it. Just kind of pull the edges apart like that and just go around, make sure it hadn't missed any spots, and if you find any gaps there, you can just apply a little extra glue to fill in the gap. You've got your nice big round sandwich of tulle and nylon, and you'll need to find the center of the netting, the tulle netting. And so the easiest way to do that is simply to fold it in half like that, get the edges lined up, and then fold it in half again in quarters. And so this point right here will be the center of the netting. You'll cut a small hole in that about 1/2 inch across. If you'd like to confirm that that is in fact the center of the netting, you can hold that point in your fingers and pull the nylon out, and notice that it all comes to the same distance from the point that you're holding here. So that is indeed the right place, and where I'm going to cut the little hole through which we'll pull the nylon and invert the parachute. Okay, so just make a hole at the center of the netting, just about big enough to get your finger into, and then we're going to pull it inside out. So pull this part through that hole. And the most reliable way to do that is to start at the perimeter here. You don't want to pull all the glued part through at once because it's kind of wide. So actually start at the perimeter of it, hand it to yourself through the hole, like this, and start pulling it through, gathering a little bit more of the perimeter with each pull as you go, so you don't want to enlarge that hole any larger than you have to get all of the material to come through. Okay, now you'll see you have a nice finished edge with the glue effectively on the inside of the seam there. So this is nice and smooth and aesthetic, and then the hole that it's gone through invariably is enlarged a little bit, but you haven't cut through any more of the material. It's just merely stretched out the hole that you created initially. Now it's time to add the suspension line and finish it up. Okay, for this part, of course, you'll need your suspension line, and I like parachute cord or P cord because it's just about the right thickness, but it's nice and supple. And just tie a simple overhand knot in it, just like that. And then you'll need a zip tie. It's usually the smaller the better, to a point. And I'd recommend pre-engaging the teeth so that once you get it positioned correctly, you can just snap it down tight. Next, what you'll do is drop the knot that you've created into the hole at the center of the netting, like that, and go ahead and put it in amply far. It's impossible to put it in too far. And then just gather the hole through the netting more or less symmetrically around the cord, like that, and hold it. Apply your zip tie through the cord, and get it up over the netting. Now at this point, before you tighten it down, I recommend just inspecting to make sure that you've got at least about 1/2 inch of a bite of the netting all the way around the cord. And once you're happy with that, just go ahead and tighten it up, just like that. And then you can pull the knot down tight, and you'll see that that's a nice secure attachment there. Trim off the tail from your zip tie right there, and since this will leave a little bit of a rough spot that's a little sharp that can occasionally catch the netting as it deploys. It can catch it. This is the part that I recommend putting either some shrink tubing or some electrical tape just to kind of smooth that out. So here I've got the shrink tubing ready to apply heat to, and then if you're using a lighter as I do, I would highly recommend you cover the netting with some masking tape or electrical tape or something that will protect the netting from the flame, and so you don't burn a hole in your brand new parachute. And so you just would take that and just gently apply heat to it to shrink down your tubing, cover up the knot, the excess netting, and the zip tie. So when finished, it should look something like this, nice and clean and neat, slick without any snags or protrusions, and ready to use. And here's the other end of your bridle that you can attach to the payload or cargo however you like. I do highly recommend that the length of your bridle or suspension line, however you want to think of it, be at least 2 diameters of the parachute. So this is a 30-inch diameter parachute. This should be 60 inches long, particularly if you want to use the extraction technique. Now, as to how to pack your parachute, there are a lot of ways, and I'll show you at least a couple. The first, since this is modeled on a skydiving pilot parachute, I'll show you the way that is typically done, is by leaving the netting flat against the nylon, folding it like this, quartering like this, folding it over, putting your bridle inside, and then rolling it like this. And this is a very compact way to do it, but it tends to cause malfunctions at the low speeds that we're using in RC, and that what happens is the apex of the parachute, the nylon here, will actually invert inside, and it can drag the parachute like this rather than opening up correctly as it should like this.
Work? Did everybody live?
More reliable way for us in RC is to go ahead and stretch it out like the way that it's going to be when it deploys. And I like to take the apex of the parachute like this and then fold it over in thirds and over in thirds so that the actual canopy of the parachute, the nylon, is in thirds, and then continue that process 2, 3 with the netting. So you've got 6 folds, everything is stacked up like that, and then just find the apex here, that's the top of the parachute, and sort of fan that out and roll that around the rest of the parachute. And then you can hold that however you need to put it in your release mechanism. It's not quite as pretty. It has some netting exposed and it's not a nice compact package, but when it's released, it's already in the position that it needs to be to catch air and open up. So one more time, it's stretch it out, hold this in your hand, 1, 2, and thirds, take the top, wrap it around, and then place that in your deployment mechanism. As far as where the bridle goes, I typically just wind it up inside my hand like that and apply that to the release mechanism. You can actually tuck it up in there a little bit if you like, but generally the freer that bridle is upon release, as easily as it can fall out, the more reliable your deployment will be.